I am Amara. I'm 33 years old and I pay $12,000 a month for silence. My penthouse rises above Lake Michigan in Chicago, walls of glass, height and distance carefully chosen to keep chaos out. I built this life to be untouchable, secure, controlled. But at 2:14 a.m. silence broke. Not with footsteps, not with shattered glass, with a vibration on my nightstand. A work phone alert, then another, and another. Because sometimes the most dangerous breach doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people who already have the keys. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This story isn't just about money or silence, it's about what happens when the people with access cross the line. Note: some elements are fictionalized for storytelling and educational purposes, but the message is real. It was a red alert from American Express. Transaction authorized $500 Roblox credits. I blinked, trying to clear the sleep from my eyes. Another notification popped up instantly. Transaction authorized $1,200 Epic Games. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was my platinum card. The card with a limit that could buy a small house. Then came the big one. Transaction authorized $4,200 Titan Pro golf equipment. I sat up straight in bed, the silk sheets sliding down my waist. The glow of the city outside was cold, but the fire in my chest was hot. This was not a hacker in Russia. Hackers do not buy golf clubs at 2 in the morning. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking app. The numbers scrolled past like a slot machine that had malfunctioned. In the span of 90 minutes, my account had been drained of $8,600. That is more than some people make in 3 months. I stared at the balance. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice water in my veins. This was not just theft. This was a violation. I did not call the police immediately. That is not how a senior director of risk management operates. I operate on data. I operate on proof. I got out of bed and walked to my office, the marble floor cold against my bare feet. I sat down at my desk and woke up my 3 monitors. The screens bathed the room in a blue light. I logged into the transaction portal. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I needed to see the location. I needed to see the IP address. The system processed for a second and then spat out the result. Location verified. Residential IP. Marietta, Georgia. My sister Destiny's house. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Of course. I looked at the card details again. It was the emergency supplementary card I had given Destiny 3 years ago. I gave it to her when her husband Hunter lost his job. I told her specifically that this card is for life and death situations, Destiny. It is for medicine. It is for food if the fridge is empty. It is not for video games. And it is certainly not for $4,000 worth of professional golf gear. I looked at the timestamp. The transaction started at midnight and ended 10 minutes ago. They waited until they thought I was asleep. They thought I was just the rich, oblivious sister who would pay the bill without looking. They thought I was an ATM with a pulse. I looked at the family photo on my desk. It was taken 5 years ago before the money changed everything. Destiny looked happy. My mother Wanda looked proud. Now all I saw were leeches. I closed the laptop. I did not call Destiny. I did not text her to ask what happened. I knew what happened. They got greedy. And now they were going to pay. At 7 o'clock sharp, I was behind the wheel of my Audi Q8. The morning sun was just hitting the Chicago skyline, reflecting off the glass towers like fire. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. My bespoke crimson blazer was perfectly tailored, hugging my shoulders like armor. My hair was pulled back in a tight, uncompromising bun. I wore my signature matte lipstick, the color of dried blood. I looked like a woman ready to close a merger worth millions, or fire an entire department without blinking. But I was not driving to a boardroom. I was driving to the suburbs to confront the people who claimed to love me while picking my pockets. The drive usually took 30 minutes, but my foot was heavy on the gas pedal today. The city landscape faded into manicured lawns and white picket fences, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway of the four-bedroom colonial in Marietta, the house I co-signed for, the house where I paid 60% of the mortgage every single month because Destiny and Hunter were always just a little short. Seeing the structure usually gave me a sense of pride, a tangible reminder of how far I had come from our cramped apartment in the projects. Today it just looked like a parasite made of brick and mortar. I stepped out of my pristine car, and the contrast was immediate and insulting. The recycling bins were overflowing and knocked over, spilling empty beer cans and soda bottles onto the lawn. A rusty bicycle lay on its side in the middle of the walkway, like a trap waiting to be sprung. The grass was overgrown. Weeds were choking the hydrangeas I had paid a landscaper to plant last spring. This was how they treated my investment, with total and utter neglect. I did not knock. I used my key, the key I paid for. As I pushed open the heavy oak door, the air conditioning hit me, but it carried a heavy, musty scent of stale food and unwashed laundry. The foyer was a disaster zone. A pair of muddy golf shoes sat right in the center of the cream-colored Persian rug I had bought them for Christmas. I stepped over a pile of unopened mail, mostly bills marked urgent, and walked into the living room. It looked like a fraternity house after a party. 3 empty pizza boxes, greased and open, were scattered on the coffee table next to a half-drunk bottle of cheap wine. A bag of chips had been spilled on the sofa and crushed into the fabric. I stood there in my $600 heels, trying to find a clean spot to stand on the hardwood floor. My suit felt too clean for this room. My ambition felt out of place in this shrine to laziness. This was the life they claimed they were struggling to maintain. This was the hardship they needed my money to survive. They were not struggling. They were drowning in excess and entitlement, and they were using my bank account as their life raft. I looked at the chaos and realized something profound. They did not respect the money because they did not earn it. To them, I was not a person. I was just a magical faucet that poured cash whenever they turned the handle. Well, the faucet was about to run dry. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of their failure, and marched toward the kitchen. It was time to wake them up. Destiny finally shuffled into the kitchen, wrapping a stained pink bathrobe around her waist. She looked at me standing there in my tailored suit and actually rolled her eyes. She did not ask why I was there. She did not ask if I was okay. She just walked past me to the refrigerator and pulled out a carton of orange juice, drinking directly from the container. "You are up early," she muttered, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Did you bring donuts? Trey likes the glazed ones." I placed my phone on the sticky granite countertop. The screen was still glowing with the transaction list. "I did not bring donuts, Destiny. I brought a question. Why is there $8,600 missing from my emergency account?" Destiny glanced at the phone and then shrugged. She looked bored. "Oh, that. Trey was just playing on the iPad. He bought some upgrades for his game. You know how kids are. They press buttons." I stared at her. He pressed buttons for 90 minutes straight. He pressed buttons that bought $4,000 of golf equipment. Since when does an 11-year-old play professional golf? Destiny waved her hand dismissively, avoiding my gaze. "Hunter needed new clubs, okay? He has a big meeting with a client on the green next week. If he lands this deal, he can pay you back." "Why are you being so dramatic, Amara? It is just money. I thought that black card of yours was unlimited anyway." The air left my lungs. She actually believed that. She believed my hard-earned money was a magical, bottomless pit. She thought that because I worked in finance, money just appeared in my pocket like magic. I looked over at the living room sofa where Trey was sprawled out. The iPad was propped up on his knees. The sounds of explosions and digital coins clinking echoed through the quiet house. "Trey," I called out. He did not move. He did not blink. "Trey, look at me." Mom said, "I do not have to listen to you if you are yelling," he said without looking up, his eyes glued to the screen. And Dad said, "You are rich, so it does not matter." Not. I looked at my nephew. He was 11 years old, but he was already ruined. He had his father's entitlement and his mother's laziness. He was playing a game bought with my theft, wearing headphones I probably paid for sitting in a house I was keeping afloat. And he could not even look me in the eye. "It matters, Trey," I said softly. "It matters because it is not your money, and it is not your parents' money. It is mine." Destiny slammed the juice carton down on the counter, causing a splash of orange liquid to hit the floor. "Stop harassing my son Amara. He is a child. My God, you are acting like we stole your kidney. You make 6 figures. Just write it off as a tax deduction or whatever you corporate people do. Do not come into my house and stress us out before breakfast." I looked at my sister. I really looked at her. I realized then that she did not see a sister when she looked at me. She saw a resource she felt entitled to mine until it was empty, but she forgot one thing. Mines eventually run out or they collapse on top of the miners. Hunter finally strolled into the kitchen wearing his pastel polo shirt, tucked into khaki shorts, ready for a day at the country club. He walked straight to the $2,000 Breville espresso machine sitting on the counter. The one I had bought them for Christmas because Destiny complained that instant coffee gave her migraines. He took his time frothing the milk, humming a tune while I stood there with my blood boiling. He poured the latte into a mug that said "World's Best Dad" and finally turned to face me. He took a long, loud sip and smirked. "Morning, Amara," he said casually, as if I had not just accused his family of grand larceny. "You look incredibly tense. Is this still about the credit card thing?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Still about it." "Hunter, it has been less than an hour since I found out you stole $8,000. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "You are making a mountain out of a molehill, Amara. Truly you are. This is the problem with you career women. You are so obsessed with your spreadsheets and your bottom lines that you forget about what really matters in life." He leaned back against the counter, swirling his coffee. "You do not have children, Amara, so you simply cannot understand the concept of unconditional love. You do not know what it is like to see your son's face light up when he gets something he really wants. When you are a parent, you make sacrifices. You do whatever it takes to make your kid happy." I clenched my fists at my sides so hard my fingernails dug into my palms. He was lecturing me on sacrifice. He was lecturing me on parenting while using my money to buy his son silence and obedience instead of actually raising him. I opened my mouth to speak to tell him that theft is not love, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Look, I get it. You are stressed. It must be incredibly difficult keeping up at that big fancy firm of yours, especially for someone like you." I narrowed my eyes. "Someone like me." I repeated, my voice drop-dead calm. Hunter shrugged, feigning innocence, but the malice was dancing in his eyes. "You know what I mean, Amara. The corporate world is competitive. I am sure your company has quotas to fill. Diversity hires and affirmative action programs are very popular right now. It must be exhausting trying to prove you actually belong in that corner office when everyone knows how the game is played." The silence in the kitchen was sudden and deafening. There it was. The truth he had been hiding behind fake smiles for years. He did not respect me. He did not think I earned my success. He believed I was a charity case, a box to be checked, a diversity hire. Yet he had absolutely no problem spending the money that my so-called unearned job provided. He looked down on me for my race and my gender, but he looked up to my bank account. I looked at his smug, arrogant face and realized that arguing with a man like Hunter was useless. You do not argue with a parasite. You simply strike the match and burn it out. The sound of footsteps on the stairs stopped the conversation cold. My mother Wanda descended like royalty in her floral silk pajamas. She did not look at the mess in the living room. She did not look at the pizza boxes or the spilled juice. Her eyes locked onto me immediately. Why is there so much shouting this early in the morning, Amara? You are upsetting your nephew. She walked over to Trey, who was still pretending to be absorbed in his game, and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. I held up my phone, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. Mother, he stole $8,000 from my emergency account. He bought golf clubs and video game credits. This is not a misunderstanding. This is theft. Wanda barely glanced at the screen. She sighed a long, heavy sigh of exhaustion, as if I was the one being unreasonable. She walked past me to the coffee pot and poured herself a cup, ignoring the tension in the room. Oh, stop it, Amara. You are making a scene over nothing. He is just a boy. He does not understand the value of $1 the way you do. She turned to face me, leaning against the counter next to Hunter. You have so much money you do not know what to do with it. You live in that big, empty apartment all by yourself. Why are you begrudging your family a little happiness? Your sister is struggling, Amara. Hunter is trying to get his business off the ground. And instead of helping you come here waving bills around like a debt collector. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I pay the mortgage on this house. I pay for your health insurance, Mother. I pay for the car sitting in the driveway. I have spent 10 years being the safety net for this family. And the one time I ask for respect, I am called a debt collector. Wanda took a sip of her coffee and delivered the line that severed the last thread of my loyalty. Look at you in your expensive suit. You have lost touch with what matters. Let it go, Amara. Kids will be kids. You can make that money back in a week. Do not be selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman I had spent my entire adult life trying to please, trying to buy love from. And finally I saw the truth. I was not her daughter. I was her retirement plan. I was her credit line. She did not love me. She loved what I provided. I did not argue. I did not scream. A cold calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt before firing an employee for embezzlement. I picked up my phone. You are right, Mother, I said softly. My voice was steady. Too steady. Kids will be kids, but adults have to pay their bills. I turned around and walked out the door. I did not slam it. I closed it gently. It was the sound of a vault door locking shut. As I walked to my car, the tears did not come. Instead, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan that started with a phone call to the power company. The elevator ride to the 40th floor took exactly 45 seconds. In that short span of time, I shed the skin of the hurt daughter and put on the armor of the senior risk director. When the doors slid open, I walked past the reception desk without my usual smile. My assistant Sarah started to stand up, holding a stack of messages, but I raised a hand to stop her. Hold all calls. Sarah, I said, my voice flat and monotone. I am in a crisis management meeting. She nodded, sensing the dangerous energy radiating off me. I walked into my corner office and closed the heavy glass door. The sound of the magnetic lock engaging was the most satisfying thing I had heard all morning. I walked over to the panel on the wall and pressed the button marked, Do Not Disturb. A red light illuminated outside my door, signaling to the world that Amara was unreachable. I was alone. Finally, alone in my glass tower high above the noise and the guilt trips. I sat down behind my expansive mahogany desk and woke up my workstation. Three 32-inch monitors flickered to life, bathing my face in a cool artificial glow. This was my domain. Out there in the suburbs, I was just the bitter, childless aunt. But in here, I was the woman who decided which companies survived and which ones went bankrupt. I opened a secure folder on my private drive. It was a spreadsheet I had ironically named The Village because my mother always loved to say that it takes a village to raise a child. I realized now that the saying was incomplete. In our family, it took a village to support 2 grown adults who refused to work. I clicked open the master financial map. It was a visual representation of every dollar that left my accounts. The screen filled with a complex web of lines and nodes. At the center was a large green circle representing my income. Radiating out from it were dozens of red lines feeding into three smaller circles labeled Destiny Hunter and Wanda. It looked like a medical diagram of a parasitic infection. I leaned in, tracing the lines with my eyes. Here was the mortgage payment for their house, $2,800 a month. Here was the car note for the Tesla Hunter drove $700. Here was the family cell phone plan, $400. Health insurance premiums, streaming services, grocery delivery subscriptions. Even the damn dog food was on autopay from my account. I sat back in my chair and spun a pen between my fingers. For years I had looked at this spreadsheet and told myself I was being a good sister. I told myself I was sharing my blessings. But looking at it now after the betrayal of this morning, I saw it for what it really was. This was not charity. This was an addiction. And I was the supplier. I was feeding their incompetence. I was financing their disrespect. The graph showed that 90% of their lifestyle was funded by my labor. They were living like kings on a pauper's effort, and I was the one sweating in a suit to make it happen. I stopped spinning the pen and gripped it hard. The sadness was gone, replaced by the cold clinical detachment of an auditor finding fraud in the books. I reached for my mouse. It was time to sever the connection. My mouse hovered over the icon for the national telecom provider. This was the first domino. It was the easiest one to knock over, but it would cause the most immediate chaos. I clicked open the dashboard for the family plan. There they were. 5 lines. One for me, one for Destiny, one for Hunter, one for my mother, and even one for 11-year-old Trey because Destiny insisted he needed the latest iPhone Pro Max for safety reasons. I paid for all of them. The monthly bill was nearly $400. That ended today. I did not just click cancel service. That would be too kind. Cancellation takes 24 hours to process, and sometimes they send a warning text. I wanted immediate darkness. I navigated to the lost or stolen devices section. My heart rate did not even spike. I felt the cold precision of a surgeon making an incision. I selected Destiny's number first. Reason for suspension stolen. I clicked confirm. One down. Then I moved to Hunter's line. He was probably on a call right now lying to a client or laughing with his friends about his rich, gullible sister-in-law. I imagined the phone going dead against his ear. I imagined him staring at the screen, tapping it in confusion. I clicked confirm. 2 down. I went down the list. My mother's phone, Trey's phone, all of them reported stolen. This was the nuclear option. By reporting them stolen, I was not just cutting the service. I was blacklisting the IMEI numbers. That meant the devices themselves were now useless bricks of glass and titanium. They could not just put in a new SIM card. They could not take them to another carrier. Those $1,000 phones were now expensive paperweights. I watched the status indicators turn from green to red one by one. Offline. 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 The silence in my office was absolute, but I knew that miles away in Marietta, panic was beginning to set in. In the modern world, a smartphone is not just a phone, it is your GPS, your wallet, your connection to the world. And I had just severed the cord. Next, I opened the tab for the internet provider. The fiber optic connection at Destiny's house was the fastest available package, essential for Trey's gaming addiction and Hunter's so-called business research. I logged in as the primary account holder. I went straight to the billing section and removed my credit card. Then I clicked on the service suspension option. Reason for suspension: non-payment. None. Effective immediately. A small warning box popped up on the screen. Suspending service will result in an immediate loss of internet connectivity for the residents. Are you sure? I looked at the prompt. Was I sure? Was I sure I wanted to stop paying for the internet that allowed my nephew to gamble away my savings? Was I sure I wanted to stop paying for the Wi-Fi that allowed my sister to post lies about me online? I clicked yes. The confirmation screen appeared. Service suspended. I leaned back in my chair. The digital lifeline was cut. Now they were stranded on an island of their own making. No Google Maps to find their way out. No Uber to call for a ride. No Instagram to complain to their followers. Just silence. And soon that silence would be broken by the screaming. I minimized the telecom tab and opened the Tesla application on my phone. This was my favorite part. Hunter drove a matte black Model X that I had leased under my company's name for tax purposes. He treated it like his personal chariot, washing it twice a week and parking it in the front row at the country club to impress his friends. To him, it was a status symbol. To me, it was a remote-controlled toy, and I held the controller. The app showed me exactly where he was. The little arrow was moving southbound on Interstate 75, doing 75 miles per hour. He was likely heading into the city for a meeting, or so he claimed. I knew Hunter. He was probably driving with the windows down and the music up, trying to look like a millionaire real estate mogul, instead of a man who could not afford his own Netflix subscription. I tapped the security settings menu. My finger hovered over the valet mode option. This feature is designed to limit the car's performance when you hand the keys to a parking attendant, preventing them from joyriding. It locks the glove box, limits acceleration, and most importantly, caps the top speed. I set the maximum speed limit to exactly 10 miles per hour. I smiled as I pressed enable. Miles away on a busy 6-lane highway, the effects would be instantaneous. I imagined the scene. The powerful electric motors would suddenly cut power. The regenerative braking would kick in, dragging the car down from highway speeds to a crawl. The cars behind him would honk and swerve. Hunter would be slamming on the gas pedal, wondering why his high-performance machine had suddenly turned into a golf cart. He would be panicking, thinking the battery had died or the engine had failed. He would try to pull over, but at 10 miles per hour on an interstate, that is a terrifying experience. But I was not done. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to be humiliated. I swiped over to the media control tab. Since the car was connected to my account, I could control the stereo from 40 stories up. I searched for a song. I did not choose heavy metal or rap. I chose the one song that every parent dreads. The one song that drills into your brain and never leaves. Baby Shark. I selected the track and set it to repeat. Then I dragged the volume slider all the way to 100%. The app confirmed the command. Signal sent. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes to visualize the chaos. Hunter was now crawling along the shoulder of the highway at 10 miles per hour with a line of angry traffic behind him. And inside the car, the speakers were blasting Baby Shark do-do-do-do-do-do at a volume loud enough to shake the windows. He would be frantically jabbing at the touchscreen, trying to turn it off, but he could not. I had locked the interface remotely. He was trapped in a slow-moving noise box of his own making. Everyone driving past him would see a grown man in a luxury car listening to nursery rhymes at ear-splitting volume while driving slower than a bicycle. It was petty, it was childish, and it was absolutely delicious. I watched the GPS arrow inch forward painfully slow and took a sip of my sparkling water. Phase 2 was complete. With the car situation handled, I turned my attention back to the smaller but equally irritating hemorrhages in my bank account. I opened the tab labeled Recurring Subscriptions. This was the silent killer of wealth. It was the slow drip of $10 here and $20 there that eventually flooded the basement. My eyes scanned the list, and the sheer audacity of it made me laugh a dry, humorless sound. First up was the streaming services. Netflix Premium, Hulu Live TV, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Spotify Family Plan, Apple Music, Amazon Prime. It was an endless buffet of entertainment that I was paying for, but never had time to watch. I clicked on the Netflix account settings. There were 5 profiles. Mine was at the bottom, untouched for 6 months. Hunter's profile was named The King. Destiny's was Queen D, and Trey's was simply Boss. I stared at the avatar for The King. It was a picture of a lion. The irony was suffocating. A lion who could not even afford to pay for his own documentaries. I did not just cancel the subscription. That would allow them to watch until the end of the billing cycle. No, I went into the security settings. I selected sign out of all devices. Then I changed the password to a randomly generated string of 20 characters that no human could ever guess. I did the same for Hulu, for Disney, for Spotify. In living rooms and bedrooms across that house, screens were going black right now. The music stopped. The movies froze. The endless stream of distraction that kept them numb and happy was suddenly cut off. They would have to sit in the silence and actually talk to each other. Next was the gym membership. Equinox, $250 a month for Hunter. He claimed he needed it for networking. I looked at the check in history. He went at 10 in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Prime time for socializing, not for working out. I picked up the phone and called the membership desk. I am canceling the membership for Hunter effective immediately, I told the concierge. When asked for a reason, I did not hesitate. Unauthorized use of corporate funds. It was technically true. My company, my funds. Finally, I arrived at the heavy hitters, the utilities, the Georgia Power Company and the County Water Authority. For 5 years, the bills had been sent directly to my inbox and paid automatically from my checking account. They had never even seen an electricity bill. They probably thought the lights stayed on by magic. I could not legally shut off the power from here without a disconnect order, which took time. But I could stop being the battery. I logged into the utility portal. I navigated to the payment methods. There was my Visa card sitting there like a loyal soldier. I clicked remove. A warning popped up. Removing the only payment method will stop automatic billing. Your account may become delinquent. I clicked confirm. Then I did something petty, but necessary. I changed the billing email address from mine to Hunter's email. The next time the bill came due in 14 days, it would land in his inbox. And when he ignored it, because he ignores everything that is not fun, the lights would eventually go out. I was not leaving them in the dark today. I was just handing them the flashlight and telling them to buy their own batteries. The audit was almost complete. I looked at the total monthly savings ticker on my screen. It was climbing rapidly, but the emotional weight lifting off my shoulders was priceless. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, the silence of my office was shattered not by my cell phone, which was blissfully silent, but by the landline on my desk. It was a harsh, jarring ring that echoed against the glass walls. I knew exactly who it was. My cell phone was blocked. The house internet was down. Their personal cells were bricked. The landline at my firm was the only thread they had left to pull. I watched it ring 3 times. My executive assistant, Sarah, looked up from her desk outside the glass door, her eyes wide with concern. She knew I was in a crisis management state. I waved her in. "Come in here, Sarah," I said calmly. "You might want to hear this. It is a lesson in liability." I picked up the receiver and pressed the speakerphone button. I did not even say hello. Immediately, Destiny's voice filled the room, screeching at a volume that made the Polycom unit vibrate. "Amara, what the hell is going on? I am standing at the checkout line at Whole Foods and your card just got declined." The machine made that horrible beeping noise and now the cashier is holding it up like I am a criminal. "Fix it! Fix it right now!" I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my chamomile tea. Sarah stood by the door, clutching her notepad, her jaw slightly dropped. I kept my voice smooth and professional, the voice of a woman who was in total control. "Hello, Destiny. I believe the term you are looking for is insufficient funds, or perhaps account closed." Destiny let out a sound of pure frustration. I could hear the background noise of the supermarket, the beeping of scanners, the murmuring of impatient customers behind her. "Amara, do not play games with me right now. I have $300 worth of organic produce and Wagyu beef in this cart. There is a line of people behind me giving me dirty looks. It is humiliating. And why does my iPhone say no service? I tried to use Apple Pay and it is dead. Hunter's phone is dead too. Did you forget to pay the bill? I glanced at Sarah, who was now trying to suppress a look of shock. Destiny was buying Wagyu beef, the most expensive beef on the planet, and she was doing it with the card I gave her for emergencies. The audacity was breathtaking. No, Destiny, I said clearly. I did not forget to pay the bill. I canceled the service. And as for the credit card, I reported it compromised due to fraudulent activity. You know the activity I am talking about. The $8,000 in video games and golf clubs. There was a pause on the other end, a heavy, stunned silence. Then Destiny's voice dropped to a hiss. You did what? You cut off our phones. Amara, I have a child. What if there is an emergency? What if Trey gets sick? You are putting your nephew in danger because you are petty. I sat forward. My voice hardened. No, Destiny. You put your family in danger when you stole from the person who feeds you. If there is an emergency, use a payphone. Oh, wait. You probably do not have quarters because you spent them all on candy. As for the groceries, I suggest you put the Wagyu beef back and buy something you can actually afford, like ramen noodles. Amara. Wait. Do not you dare hang up, I will tell Mom. I pressed the end call button. The line went dead. The silence rushed back into the room, instantly cleansing the air of her toxicity. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. Sarah, please make a note. If anyone from the Wilson family calls again, tell them I am in a meeting with the FBI regarding identity theft. It is not true yet, but by tomorrow morning it will be. Sarah nodded quickly and retreated to her desk. I looked at the phone. 1 breakdown confirmed. 2 to go. 10 minutes after I hung up on my sister, a notification popped up on the corner of my third monitor. It was a message request on Facebook Messenger from a user named Kyle the Skater. I did not know anyone named Kyle. I clicked on the message, and the text that filled the screen was written in all capital letters. It was not from Kyle. It was from Hunter. Amara, you crazy witch! You locked my car on the interstate. I almost got hit by a semi-truck because the speed dropped to 10 miles per hour. I am stranded at a gas station, and I had to borrow this kid's phone because my service is dead. Turn the car back on. Turn the phones back on. I am missing the biggest meeting of my career right now. You are going to pay for this. I stared at the words. There was no apology. There was no explanation for the $8,000 he had stolen. There was only aggression and entitlement. He was stranded on the side of the road using a stranger's phone, and he still thought he was in a position to give orders. He truly believed that his inconvenience was a bigger crime than his theft. He thought he could bully me into submission just like he bullied my sister. I took a sip of my tea and cracked my knuckles. I did not type back a defense. I did not try to explain why I was angry. I simply treated him like a delinquent client. I opened a blank document and drafted a formal demand letter. Dear Hunter, this message serves as a formal notice of debt. You are currently in possession of $8,600 of stolen funds. Additionally, you are in breach of the verbal agreement regarding the use of the company vehicle. To restore services, you must remit the full principal amount, plus a 15% convenience fee, and a $200 administrative penalty for the time I have spent auditing your fraud. The total amount due is $10,090. Payment is expected within 24 hours. Failure to pay will result in further asset recovery actions. I copied the text and pasted it into the chat window. I added one final line. Please thank Kyle for lending you his phone, and tell him not to expect a tip because I know you do not have any cash. I hit send, then I immediately blocked the account. I leaned back in my chair and watched the cursor blink. I knew Hunter. Right now, he was standing in the parking lot of a Shell station, screaming at a phone that could no longer receive messages. His face was probably turning that dangerous shade of purple. He was furious not because he was innocent, but because for the first time in his life, his anger was not working. He could not yell his way out of this, He could not intimidate the algorithm. The only way out was to pay up. And I knew he did not have the money. That meant the desperation was about to set in. And desperate men make mistakes. I checked my watch. It was almost noon. The real show was just getting started. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the initial shock had worn off. It was replaced by something far uglier. The confusion transformed into a white-hot rage. I could feel it even from 20 miles away. My blocking of Hunter on Facebook was the final signal. It told them clearly that I was not negotiating, I was collecting. And since they had no intention of paying, the war had officially begun. I imagined the scene inside that house in Marietta. Hunter eventually made it home, likely having to beg a ride from a stranger or pay cash for a taxi, which probably bruised his fragile ego more than the heat. He would have stormed through the front door, sweating and furious, kicking the pile of mail in the foyer. Destiny would be there, pacing the living room, her expensive grocery run abandoned at the store. She would be looking at her useless phone, tapping the screen as if force of will could bring the signal back. My mother Wanda would be sitting on the sofa, shaking her head, playing the martyr, wondering where she went wrong in raising such a cruel, ungrateful daughter. They were not sitting there reflecting on their theft. They were not asking themselves how they could fix this or how they could apologize. No. In their minds, I was the villain. I was the tyrant who had cut off their life support for no reason. They were feeding off each other's anger, amplifying their victimhood until it became a solid weapon. They realized they had no leverage over me financially. They could not threaten to cut me off because I was the one holding the scissors. They could not threaten to leave because they had nowhere to go, so they turned to the only weapon they had left: public opinion. Since they could not reach me to scream in my ear, they decided to scream to the world. I saw the signs of mobilization. Destiny likely grabbed her car keys and drove to the nearest Starbucks, not for coffee, but for the free Wi-Fi. She needed a connection. She needed an audience. She needed to spin the narrative before the truth of their theft got out. She was going to use the one thing she knew I cared about: my reputation. I sat in my office watching the clouds drift over the Chicago skyline. I knew what was coming next. The smear campaign, the guilt-tripping, the weaponization of family values to paint me as a monster. I took a deep breath and opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Defamation Evidence. I was not afraid of their lies. I had the receipts, and if they wanted to drag this into the public square, I would make sure every single skeleton in their closet came out to dance. The silence was over. The storm had arrived. The digital assault began at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. My social media monitoring software pinged softly, a sound that usually indicated a market shift or a news alert. But this was personal. A notification slid onto my main screen. Destiny Wilson has tagged you in a post. I clicked the link, and there it was. A masterpiece of manipulation. Destiny had posted a photograph of Trey. He was sitting on the front steps of their house, looking down at his shoes with a staged expression of utter dejection. The lighting was perfect. The angle was calculated to induce maximum sympathy. But it was the caption that truly impressed me with its audacity. It was not just a post. It was a manifesto of victimhood. "I am shaking as I write this," she began. "It breaks my heart to air family business publicly, but I have no choice. Today, my own sister Amara, who has been blessed with so much wealth and success, decided to cut off her family in our time of need. Because of a simple misunderstanding over a few charges, my sister has shut off our phones, turned off our internet, and threatened to take our car. She has left her 11-year-old nephew stranded without a way to contact the outside world. I never thought money could change a person so much. We are struggling to make ends meet, and she is sitting in her penthouse judging us. Please pray for my family as we navigate this betrayal." I read the words twice. A simple misunderstanding. That is what she called grand larceny. She conveniently omitted the part about the video games. She left out the $4,000 golf clubs. She painted a picture of a cruel rich aunt punishing a starving family for a clerical error, and the internet swallowed it whole. I scrolled down to the comments section. It was a feeding frenzy. Relatives I had not spoken to in a decade, people who did not even know my phone number, were suddenly experts on my character. My Aunt Bernice, who never sent a birthday card, wrote, "Shame on you, Amara. You have forgotten where you came from. God does not like ugly." My cousin Dante, who had been in and out of jail for fraud, commented, "Typical. She gets a little corporate job and thinks she is better than us. She is acting like she is white now." The comments piled up by the minute, hundreds of them. Strangers were reacting with angry emojis. People were calling me a sellout, a traitor, a narcissist. They were dissecting my character based on the lies of a woman who had just stolen from me. It was a digital lynching. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have replied frantically, trying to defend themselves, typing out long paragraphs explaining the truth. I did not type a single word. I did not react. I simply opened my evidence folder. I took screenshots of the post. I took screenshots of the comments. I took screenshots of the timestamp. This was not just bullying. This was defamation. Destiny had just handed me the final nail for her coffin. She wanted a public trial. I was going to give her one. But the verdict would not be what she expected. The digital blockade I had set up was effective, but I had forgotten one thing: the old-fashioned telephone network. My office line, which was listed publicly on the firm's website, began to light up like a Christmas tree. I told Sarah to let them through. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the full extent of their hypocrisy. The first call was from my Aunt Bernice, a woman who had not called me on my birthday in 6 years, a woman who had skipped my college graduation because she had a bingo tournament. But today she had plenty of time. "Amara, Jean Wilson." She bellowed into the receiver, her voice thick with self-righteousness. "I just saw your sister's post. Lord have mercy. Is this how we raised you? To turn your back on your own blood over a few dollars? You are forgetting where you came from, girl. You think because you live in that glass tower downtown that you are too good for us now. You have lost your roots." I held the phone away from my ear. "I have not lost my roots, Aunt Bernice," I said calmly. "I just refuse to let those roots strangle me." She hung up on me. But the phone rang again instantly. This time it was Uncle Marcus. He was a man who had borrowed $2,000 from me 5 years ago to start a landscaping business that never bought a single lawnmower. "You are acting like a colonizer, Amara," he spat out. "That is what you are doing. You are acting just like the white folks who used to keep us down, evicting your own sister, turning off the lights on a black family. You are doing the oppressor's work for them. You should be ashamed. You are black by skin, but your money has turned your heart white." The words hit me harder than I expected. They were weaponizing our history. They were using the trauma of our people to justify their theft. To them, holding someone accountable was an act of betrayal. In their twisted logic, allowing them to rob me blind was the only way to be authentically black. I listened to 3 more calls. Cousins I barely knew. A great aunt who called me by the wrong name. They all sang the same chorus. I was cold. I was cruel. I was a traitor to the family name. Not one of them asked about the theft. Not one of them asked why Destiny had access to my card in the first place. They only cared that the free ride was over, and it terrified them. If I could cut off Destiny, I could cut off any of them. I looked at the receiver in my hand. It felt heavy. It felt toxic. I realized then that I was not just fighting my sister. I was fighting a generational curse, a culture of enabling that said we must drown together rather than swim alone. I looked up at Sarah, who was standing in the doorway looking terrified. "Sarah," I said quietly, "unplug the main line. Send all external calls to voicemail. And if anyone says they are my family, tell them I became an orphan at 9:30 this morning." Sarah nodded and pulled the cord. The red flashing light on my desk finally went dark. The silence returned. But the words still echoed in my head. Colonizer. Traitor. I took a deep breath. If protecting my peace made me a villain, then I would be the best villain this family had ever seen. I turned back to my computer. It was time to escalate. The lobby of the Sovereign Tower is designed to intimidate. It is all Italian marble and vaulted ceilings, a cathedral of capitalism where whispers echo like shouts. But at 3 o'clock that afternoon, the hushed atmosphere was shattered by a sound that did not belong there. It was the sound of my mother screaming. Sarah buzzed my desk. Her voice was trembling. Amara Security is asking you to come down to the lobby immediately. It is your mother. She is refusing to leave and she is making a scene. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother had never visited my office in 7 years. Not when I was promoted to director. Not when I won the Industry Leader Award. She was here now for one reason only: to weaponize her presence against me, to shame me into submission. I stepped into the elevator and watched the numbers count down. 40, 30, 20. With every floor, my heart hammered harder against my ribs. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, I walked into a nightmare. Wanda Wilson was standing in the center of the atrium near the main security desk. She was not just standing, she was performing. She was crying loud theatrical sobs that echoed off the stone walls. She was clutching a tissue to her chest and rocking back and forth. A small crowd had gathered. 2 security guards, large men who could tackle an intruder in seconds, stood around her looking helpless and uncomfortable. They did not know how to handle a crying 60-year-old woman in a church hat. They looked terrified of being accused of assaulting an elderly black woman, so they just stood there letting her control the narrative. I walked closer, my heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. I heard her words clearly now. She was shouting to anyone who would listen. My own daughter. I raised her with my sweat and tears. I gave her everything, and now she lets her family starve. She sits up here in her ivory tower and turns off the lights on her own flesh and blood. She is trying to kill us. I saw the vice president of operations walking back from lunch with a high-profile client from Tokyo. He stopped and stared. I saw the interns whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting from the crazy woman to me. My professional reputation, carefully built over a decade of 80-hour weeks and flawless execution, was being dismantled in seconds by the woman who gave birth to me. She knew exactly what she was doing. This was not grief. This was tactical warfare. She knew I valued my career above all else, so she brought the bomb to my workplace. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn around and go back up to my safe, silent office and hide. But I could not. I had to face this. I took a deep breath, pushing down the humiliation and the heartbreak. I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and walked into the center of the circle. The security guard saw me and looked relieved. I locked eyes with my mother. She stopped crying for a split second to gauge my reaction, waiting for me to crumble. But I did not crumble. "Mother," I said, my voice cutting through the echo of the lobby. "Get up! You are embarrassing yourself." I walked back into my office, shaking the humiliation of the lobby scene off my shoulders like a heavy coat. I needed to focus. I needed to get back to the numbers, because numbers do not lie, and they certainly do not scream at you in public. I sat down at my desk and woke my computer. The first thing I saw was a new email sitting at the top of my inbox. It was marked high importance. The subject line read, "Notice of intent to sue for grand theft auto." It was from Hunter. I stared at the screen for a full 5 seconds, blinking slowly. I clicked open the email expecting a rant, but what I found was even more delusional. It was an attempt at a legal document written by a man whose understanding of the law clearly came from watching television dramas. To Amara Wilson, the email began. "You are hereby notified that you are in illegal possession of my property, namely, the Tesla Model X currently immobilized on Interstate 75. By locking this vehicle and restricting my access, you have committed grand theft auto and unlawful seizure." I leaned back in my chair and let out a dry, hollow laugh. He was accusing me of stealing my own car. But the next paragraph was where the true insanity lived. He wrote, You are well aware that on July 4th, 2 years ago, during the family barbecue, you verbally gifted this vehicle to me. You stated clearly in front of witnesses that the car was mine to keep. In the state of Georgia, a verbal contract is binding. If you do not unlock the vehicle immediately and transfer the title, I will be forced to file a lawsuit against you for breach of contract and emotional distress. I rubbed my temples. This man was unbelievable. He was trying to gaslight me legally. He was inventing a conversation that never happened at a barbecue, where I distinctly remembered him complaining that the Tesla was too quiet for a real man. But even if I had said those words, which I did not, he was forgetting who he was dealing with. I am a risk management director. I deal with contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I know the statute of frauds inside and out, and I know that a verbal contract for the transfer of goods valued over $500 is unenforceable, especially for a vehicle, especially without a title transfer. He was bluffing. He was trying to use big words and threats to scare me into submission. He thought that because I wanted to avoid drama, I would cave at the mention of a lawsuit. He thought I was weak. I opened my digital filing cabinet and pulled up the lease agreement for the Tesla. It was a 40-page document. My signature was on every page. My company's name was on the title. Hunter's name appeared exactly nowhere. He was an authorized driver, not an owner. I looked at his email again. It was not a threat. It was a confession of desperation. A man who has a case calls a lawyer. A man who has nothing writes an email in all capital letters demanding a car he cannot afford to insure. I did not reply. I simply forwarded his email to my personal attorney with a short note that said, "Please keep this for the harassment file." Hunter wanted to play lawyer. Fine. I would let him explain his verbal contract to a judge while wearing handcuffs for credit card fraud. He was bringing a water gun to a nuclear war, and he did not even know the missile was already in the air. The drive back to my penthouse that evening felt longer than usual. The Chicago skyline was glittering in the distance, a beautiful promise of wealth and power, but for the first time, it looked cold to me. I parked my Audi in the reserved spot next to the elevator and rode the 40 floors up in silence. When the doors opened, the silence followed me inside. Usually I loved the quiet. I loved that my home was a sanctuary away from the noise of the world. But tonight the silence felt heavy. It felt like an accusation. I kicked off my heels and walked across the marble floor to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below me, the city was moving. People were going to dinner with their families. Parents were tucking their children into bed. And here I was standing in a $3 million apartment completely and utterly alone. I poured myself a glass of red wine, but my hand was shaking slightly. The adrenaline of the day had worn off, leaving behind a hollow ache in my chest. The words of my family echoed in the empty room: traitor, colonizer, cruel. I sat down on the velvet sofa and pulled my knees to my chest. A dangerous thought crept into my mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was overreacting. It was just money after all. I had plenty of it. Was $8,000 really worth losing my sister? Was it worth making my mother cry in a public lobby? I could fix this so easily. I could pick up the landline, call the service providers, and turn everything back on. I could transfer the money to cover the debt. I could be the hero again. I could buy their love back, just like I had been doing for 10 years. The temptation was overwhelming. I just wanted the fighting to stop. I just wanted someone to ask me how my day was without looking at my wallet. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over the unblock button for destiny. Just as I was about to press it, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was an email from the mortgage lender. Subject: payment reminder. Body: Dear Amara, this is a friendly reminder that the mortgage payment of $2,800 for the property at 42 Oak Creek Drive is scheduled for autodraft tomorrow. Please ensure sufficient funds are available. I stared at the screen. 42 Oak Creek Drive, Destiny's house. Even now, while they were dragging my name through the mud, while they were suing me for a car I paid for, while they were calling me a traitor, I was still scheduled to pay for the roof over their heads. I was about to pay $3,000 so they could sleep warmly in their beds and dream of new ways to insult me. The sadness evaporated instantly. It was replaced by a clarity so sharp it almost cut. They did not miss me. They missed the payments. If I turned the lights back on tonight, they would not hug me. They would smirk. They would tell themselves that I was weak, that they had won, that I needed them more than they needed me. I put the phone down on the coffee table face down. I took a long sip of wine, letting the rich, dark liquid burn away the last of my guilt. I was not the villain in this story. I was the host, throwing off a parasite. And parasites do not go quietly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was tired, but she was not weak. "I am not lonely," I whispered to the empty room. "I am free. And tomorrow, I am going to make sure they understand the price of that freedom." I stared at the transaction line on my screen one more time. Titan Pro Golf, $4,200. My intuition told me there was more to this than just a greedy impulse purchase. Hunter was selfish, but he was also cheap. He never spent that kind of money on quality, unless he was trying to impress someone. And he certainly was not trying to impress my sister Destiny, who thought golf was the most boring sport on earth. I picked up my landline and dialed the number for the pro shop listed on the invoice. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I was not a sister calling to nag. I was an auditor calling to verify a discrepancy. A cheerful young man answered the phone on the second ring. "Titan Golf. This is Brad speaking. How can I help you improve your game today?" I kept my voice light and breezy, the voice of a helpful personal assistant. "Hi, Brad. I am calling on behalf of my boss, Mr. Hunter Wilson. He picked up a custom set of clubs from you this morning, but he is worried there might be a mistake with the engraving. He wants to make sure it was done correctly before he gifts them." Brad tapped away on a keyboard on the other end. "Wilson. Wilson. Ah, yes, here it is. The T9 carbon fiber set. Top of the line. Do not worry, ma'am, I did the engraving myself." It came out beautifully. I held my breath. My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "Could you just read back to me exactly what it says, Brad? Just for my records." "Sure thing. It is on the shaft of the driver and the putter. It says Hunter and Amber forever, with a little heart symbol in between the names." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Amber. My sister's name is Destiny. My mother's name is Wanda. There is no Amber in our family. There is no Amber in our circle of friends. But there is an Amber, and Hunter was spending $4,000 of my money to promise her forever. "Thank you, Brad," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That is exactly what I needed to know." I hung up the phone and sat in the stunning silence of my penthouse. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place, and the picture they formed was grotesque. The orange juice, the candy, the video games. It was all a smokescreen. Hunter did not just steal from me. He framed his own son. He let an 11-year-old boy take the blame for a $4,000 theft so he could hide his affair. I thought back to the morning. I remembered Trey looking down at his shoes, refusing to make eye contact. I thought he was being a brat. But now I realized he was being a scapegoat. Hunter had probably threatened him or bribed him with Roblox credits to keep his mouth shut. He hid behind his own child to protect his dirty little secret. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed immediately by a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. I had been angry about the money. I had been hurt by the disrespect. But this was evil. He was destroying my sister's marriage with one hand and corrupting his son's morality with the other, all while using my credit card to fund the destruction. I looked at the defamation evidence folder on my desktop. It was not enough anymore. Suing him for the money was too kind. Merely cutting off his phone was a slap on the wrist. Hunter Wilson had brought a mistress into my financial ecosystem. He had engraved her name on gold-plated steel, paid for by my labor. I reached for my printer. I needed hard copies. I needed the receipt. I needed the name Amber in black and white. Because tomorrow morning, I was not just going to cancel a loan. I was going to cancel Hunter's entire existence. The game was over, and I just found the cheat code. I stared at the name Amber printed on the invoice for a long moment before picking up my phone. The rage I felt earlier had crystallized into something far more dangerous. It was now a cold, hard resolve. I did not want to just sue them. I wanted to destroy them. And to do that, I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to walk into the slaughterhouse thinking it was a spa. I dialed my mother's landline number, knowing she was the central hub of information for the entire family. She answered on the second ring. Hello. Her voice was clipped and sharp. She was still playing the role of the aggrieved matriarch. Mom, it is Amara. I let the silence hang for a moment. I forced a tremor into my voice. I took a deep breath, acting the part of the broken daughter who had been shamed into submission by the internet mob. I am sorry, Mom. I saw Destiny's post on Facebook. I saw what Aunt Bernice wrote. I cannot take this anymore. I do not want to be the villain. I heard the shift in her breathing instantly. The tension left her body replaced by a smug satisfaction. She thought she had won. She thought the pressure campaign had worked. Oh, Amara, finally. I knew you would come to your senses. We are family. You cannot just cut us off like strangers. I told Destiny you would calm down eventually. I closed my eyes and massaged my temples. Yes, Mom. You were right. I overreacted about the money. I just had a long week at work. Look, I want to fix this. Tell Destiny I will meet her and Hunter tomorrow morning at the title company. I will sign the Keo-signer papers for their new house. I will make sure they get the loan. Really? Wanda's voice went up an octave. You will do that. Yes, I will do it. Let us just put this behind us. Tell them to meet me at 9 sharp. And Mom, tell Hunter I am unlocking the car now. He can drive it to the signing. I hung up the phone. I did not unlock the car immediately. I waited 5 minutes. Just enough time for Wanda to call Destiny and relay the good news. I could imagine the scene in that messy living room perfectly. Destiny would be shrieking with delight, feeling the rush of power that comes from bullying someone into compliance. See, I told you she would crack, she would say to Hunter. She is terrified of looking bad. She saw those comments and realized she needs us. Hunter would be the most unbearable of all. He would be leaning back, probably drinking the last of my beer with a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. I told you that email would scare her. She knows she cannot win a lawsuit against me. She knows I had her on a verbal contract. These corporate women are all the same. They act tough, but you just have to remind them who is really in charge. They were high-fiving each other right now. They were celebrating their victory. They were celebrating the fact that they had successfully manipulated me again. They thought they had secured their financial future. They thought they were getting a new house, a reopened credit line, and a submissive sister. They had no idea that I was not inviting them to a closing. I was inviting them to an execution. I finally opened the Tesla app and disabled valet mode. I watched the status update from restricted to ready to drive. Go ahead, Hunter, I whispered to the screen. Drive my car one last time. Enjoy the heated seats. Enjoy the premium sound system. Because tomorrow, the only thing you will be riding is in the back of a police cruiser. I turned off my computer and poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I needed to be sharp tomorrow. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rats to walk in. The dinner at my mother's house was a masterclass in gaslighting. I sat at the small dining table pushing peas around my plate while Hunter held court at the head of the table. He was eating the pot roast I had paid for, drinking the wine I had brought, and lecturing me on morality. He did not look like a man who had been caught stealing. He looked like a king who had graciously decided to pardon a peasant. You know, Amara, he said, pointing his fork at me, I am actually glad this happened. It was a wake-up call for you. You have been living in that ivory tower too long. You have forgotten how real people live. You have forgotten that family supports each other no matter what. He took a large bite of meat, chewing with his mouth slightly open. I watched him repulsed but silent. I forced a small nod, keeping my eyes lowered. You are right, Hunter, I said softly. I lost my perspective. Destiny chimed in from across the table. She was scrolling on her phone, likely checking to see if her victim post was still getting likes. Exactly. You embarrassed us, Amara. Do you know how hard it was to explain to the cashier why my card was declined? I felt like a criminal. You really need to work on your anger management. Maybe you should see a therapist. I clenched my hands under the table so hard my nails dug into my palms. They were lecturing me on anger management. They were the thieves, yet I was the one on trial. I took a deep breath. I am sorry, Destiny. I was just stressed about work. It will not happen again. Hunter leaned back in his chair looking satisfied. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and tossed it onto the table. Good. I am glad we are on the same page. Now let us talk about how you are going to fix this mess you made. First, I need the Tesla unlocked immediately. I have a tea time tomorrow morning and I cannot show up in an Uber. Second, I need you to reopen the Amex card with a higher limit. Say 20,000. The stress of this week has been hard on Destiny, and she needs a spa weekend to recover. I nodded slowly, playing the part of the beaten submission sister. Okay, I can do that. And finally, Hunter continued, his voice dropping to a serious business tone. The closing for the new house is tomorrow at 9. Since you almost tanked our credit score with that little stunt you pulled today, the bank is nervous. We need you to sign as the primary guarantor, not just a co-signer. It is just a formality, really. But it is the least you can do to make up for the emotional distress you caused your nephew. I looked up at him. Primary guarantor. That meant if they defaulted, the bank would come for my penthouse first. He was asking me to put my entire life on the line for him. And he was framing it as my penance. I looked at my mother, Wanda. She was nodding along in agreement. It is the right thing to do, Amara, she said. Help your sister get settled. Then we can all go back to being a happy family. I looked back at Hunter. He was smirking. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was stupid. I forced a smile, a weak, trembling smile. Of course, Hunter. I will be there at 9. I will sign whatever you want. Hunter clapped his hands together. Excellent. See, that is the Amara we love. Now pass the potatoes. I watched him serve himself another helping. Enjoy it, Hunter, I thought. Enjoy your last meal as a free man, because tomorrow you're going to choke on it. The moment I said yes, the atmosphere in the room shifted from interrogation to celebration. Destiny squealed like a teenager and actually clapped her hands. Oh my God, Hunter, we are getting the house. She pulled out her phone immediately, her thumbs flying across the screen. I did not have to look to know what she was doing. She was posting a victory lap. She held the phone up high, angling it to catch the light. Selfie time, Amara smile. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a rigid imitation of joy. Snap. It was done. Within seconds, she was showing me the screen. The caption read, "So blessed. Big things coming tomorrow. New house, new beginnings. Thank you to my amazing sister for always having our back. Hashtag family first. New home, #blessed." I looked at the hashtag blessed and felt a cold knot of disgust tighten in my stomach. She was thanking me publicly after spending the last 12 hours destroying my reputation. She was using me as a prop in her curated life. She did not care about me. She cared about the optics. She wanted the world to see that she had won, that she had brought the wayward sister back into the fold. Hunter was already on his phone too, calling his real estate agent. Yeah, Mike, it is a go. Have the papers ready. We will be there at 9. No glitches this time. My sister-in-law understands the situation now. He winked at me as he said it. A disgusting conspiratorial wink that said, "I own you." I stood up, my legs feeling heavy, but my mind crystal clear. "I should get going," I said. "I have to be up early to review the contracts before the signing." Hunter waved a hand dismissively. "Do not worry about reading them, Amara. It is standard boilerplate stuff. Just sign where the sticky notes are. We do not want to waste everyone's time with your red pen." I nodded. "Of course, Hunter. I will be efficient." I walked to the door and my mother stopped me. She put a hand on my arm, a hand that felt heavy and suffocating. "You did the right thing, Amara," she whispered. "This is what family does. We forgive." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me being humiliated in her own living room and said nothing. I looked at the woman who had called me selfish for not wanting to be robbed. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "This is exactly what family does." I walked out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me and I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a lifetime. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine immediately. I opened Instagram. There it was, Destiny's post, already racking up likes. Comments were pouring in. "So happy for you guys. You deserve it." I took a screenshot. Oh. Then I opened my calendar and set an alarm for 800 a.m. I labeled it "The End." They thought I had promised them a future. But I had only promised them a finale. And it was going to be spectacular. I did not go to bed. Sleep was a luxury for people who had clear consciences or people who were ignorant of the storm coming their way. I had neither. I stripped off my dinner clothes and put on my silk robe, but I did not relax. I poured a fresh cup of black coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sat down at my command center. The city outside was asleep, but the digital world never sleeps. The data streams were always flowing, and tonight I was going fishing. I logged into the secure portal for the major credit bureaus. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. As a licensed financial professional, I had access to systems that the average person only sees when they get rejected for a loan. I typed in my credentials. The two-factor authentication pinged my phone. I entered the code and the screen flashed green. Access granted. First, I pulled my own report. I needed to see if there were any surprises. My score sat at a pristine 820. It was a monument to my discipline, a testament to every latte I skipped in my 20s and every bonus I saved in my 30s. It was perfect. I scrolled down the list of inquiries. There was the recent check for the Audi lease, the mortgage on my penthouse. And then there it was. A hard inquiry from the mortgage lender for Destiny's new house, initiated yesterday. They had already started the process based on my verbal promise. They were hungry for my creditworthiness. Then I opened a new tab. It was time to look at the borrower. I entered Hunter's social security number. I knew it by heart, because I had done his taxes for the last 5 years. I hit search. The system took a moment to load. The little spinning wheel turned round and round. When the report finally populated, the screen was a sea of red. I leaned closer, my eyes widening. I knew Hunter was bad with money, but I did not know he was this bad. His credit score was the abysmal 540. That is not just poor, that is radioactive. No bank on earth would lend him money for a sandwich, let alone a $500,000 home. I scrolled through the trade lines. It was a horror show of financial mismanagement. 3 maxed-out credit cards with interest rates hovering near 30%. A personal loan from a predatory lender taken out 6 months ago for $15,000. Where did that money go? Destiny certainly never saw it. And then I saw the inquiries. In the last month alone, he had applied for 6 different credit cards and 2 auto loans, all rejected. He was drowning. He was completely and utterly insolvent. The lifestyle he was flashing around, the country club dinners, the clothes, the golf outings, it was all a lie funded by debt and my generosity. He was not asking me to be a guarantor because he wanted a better interest rate. He needed me because without my signature, he was financially dead. He was trying to use my credit to cover his grave. I looked at the debt-to-income ratio. It was over 80%. If I signed those papers tomorrow, I would not just be helping them buy a house. I would be anchoring myself to a sinking ship. The moment the ink was dry, he would default. It was a mathematical certainty. And when he did, the bank would bypass him completely and come straight for my assets. He knew this. He had to know this. He was setting me up to be his fall guy. I hit the print button. The machine whirred to life, spitting out page after page of his financial failures. I picked up the warm sheets of paper and organized them into a neat stack. I grabbed a red marker and started circling the most damning entries. The missed payments, the collections, the secret loans. By the time I was finished, the paper looked like it was bleeding. I placed the dossier into my leather briefcase. I did not need a gun for tomorrow's meeting. I had something much more lethal. I had the truth. I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel with the credit score. I thought the 540 rating was the worst of it. I was wrong. As I scrolled further down the digital rabbit hole of the credit report, something caught my eye in the section labeled Revolving Credit Accounts. There were the usual suspects: my primary American Express, my corporate card, the airline card I used for travel points. But then I saw them. 3 entries that stopped my heart cold. A Chase Sapphire Reserve, a Citibank Diamond Preferred, a Wells Fargo Active Cash. I stared at the screen, blinking rapidly, trying to make the words change. I did not open these accounts. I had never banked with Wells Fargo in my life. I looked at the open dates. The first one was opened 18 months ago. The most recent one was opened just 3 months ago. I clicked on the Details tab for the Chase card, expecting to see an error, or perhaps a fraudulent charge from a stranger in Russia or China. But the billing address was not foreign. It was local. Post Office Box 404. Kennesaw, Georgia. I knew that zip code. Kennesaw was the town right next to Marietta. It was where Hunter played golf every weekend. It was where he claimed to have his quote-unquote business meetings. I quickly cross-referenced the address with the other 2 mystery cards. They were all registered to the same P.O. box, a box that I did not own, a box that sent its statements to a ghost. My hand hovered over the calculator on my desk. I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled over me, but I forced myself to do the math. I needed to know the damage. I needed to know the price of my blindness. I started punching in the outstanding balances. $12,400 on the Chase card, $21,600 on the Citi card, $34,300 on the Wells Fargo. I hit the equal sign. The number that flashed in the display was not $8,600. It was $68,422. I sat back in my chair, gasping for air as if I had been punched in the gut. $68,000. That was a luxury car. That was a down payment on a condo. That was a college tuition. And it was all in my name. The realization washed over me like ice water. Hunter had not just used my card for a few unauthorized purchases. He had stolen my identity. He had used my social security number, my date of birth, and my mother's maiden name to open secret lines of credit. He had been living a double life for nearly 2 years, pretending to be me on paper while I smiled at him across the dinner table. He was intercepting the mail at that P.O. box. He was making minimum payments to keep the red flags from popping up, waiting for the day the house of cards would collapse. And that was why he was so desperate for the house closing tomorrow. He did not just want a new home. He needed the cash-out equity from the sale of their old place to pay off this debt before I found out. He was using me to pay off the money he stole from me. I looked at the screen. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a felony. This was fraud, punishable by up to 15 years in federal prison. I looked at the name on the screen. Hunter Wilson. He was not just a leech anymore. He was a criminal. And he had made a fatal mistake. He thought I was just a sister who could be bullied. He forgot that I was an auditor who hunted financial predators for a living. I printed the pages. The sound of the printer was the only noise in the apartment. It sounded like a judge's gavel coming down. The digital clock on my desk read 3:14 in the morning. The city of Chicago was dead asleep, buried in the silence of the early hours. But inside my office, the air was electric. I was not tired. My mind was vibrating with a cold, crystalline energy that felt sharper than caffeine. I was not just preparing for a meeting, I was building a case. I sat on the floor surrounded by a sea of paper. The printer had been running non-stop for an hour, spitting out the evidence of my betrayal. I organized the documents into 3 distinct piles. The first pile was the financial forensics. It contained the unauthorized credit card statements, the $68,000 debt, and the proof of the secret P.O. box in Kennesaw. I took a red marker and circled every single fraudulent charge. The dinners, the hotels, the jewelry stores. It was a roadmap of Hunter's double life funded by my credit score. The second pile was the personal betrayal. I printed the invoice from the golf shop. I blew up the image of the engraving on the putter shaft. Hunter and Amber, forever. The letters were grainy but legible. I clipped it together with the screenshot of Destiny's Facebook post, the one where she called me a villain while wearing clothes I bought her. This was the emotional ammunition. It was proof that while I was writing checks, they were writing lies. The third pile was the lethal one. I turned back to my monitor, and the blue glow illuminated the most dangerous document of all. It was the confirmation page from the IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. I had just finished filing a formal federal report for identity theft and wire fraud. I had uploaded the IP addresses, the credit applications, and the forged signatures. Once that submit button was pressed, there was no taking it back. It was in the system. The FBI now had a file number for Hunter Wilson. I took the physical copies of the complaint and slid them into a sleek black presentation folder. I made 3 copies, one for the loan officer at the bank, one for the closing attorney, and one for Hunter. I wanted him to hold it. I wanted him to feel the weight of the paper in his hands and realize that this was not a family dispute that could be talked away at a dinner table. This was federal prison time. I stood up and stretched, hearing my spine crack in the quiet room. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark city. Somewhere out there in the suburbs, my family was sleeping soundly. Hunter was probably dreaming of his new house, his new golf clubs, and his secret girlfriend. Destiny was probably dreaming of the likes on her Instagram post. They were resting peacefully secure in the belief that they had broken me. They thought I was the goose that laid the golden eggs. They did not realize that the goose had just turned into a wolf. I placed the 3 black folders on the table next to my purse. They looked innocent enough, just standard business documents, but inside they held the power to dissolve a marriage bankruptcy, a fraudster, and shatter a family. I checked the time, 4 o'clock, 5 hours until the meeting. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. There were dark circles under my eyes, but the eyes themselves were hard as diamonds. I did not need sleep. I needed justice. And at 9 o'clock sharp, I was going to serve it cold. The sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the Chicago skyline in violent shades of orange and purple. It was the kind of sunrise that promised heat and intensity. I stood before the full-length mirror in my dressing room. My eyes were clear. The fatigue from the sleepless night had vanished, replaced by a vibrating hum of pure adrenaline. Today was not a day for neutrals. It was not a day for the soft beiges and grays of a submissive sister. Today was a day for war. I reached for the garment bag at the very back of my closet. It was a piece I had commissioned in Milan 3 years ago, but never had the occasion to wear. It was too aggressive for board meetings, too intimidating for client dinners. But for a family execution, it was perfect. I unzipped the bag and the fabric caught the morning light. It was a bespoke power suit in a shade of crimson, so deep it looked like fresh arterial blood. I stepped into the trousers. They were tailored to within a millimeter of my life, sitting high on the waist, and falling in a sharp, clean line to my ankles. Then came the jacket. As I buttoned it, the fabric hugged my frame like armor. The shoulders were structured and sharp enough to cut glass. The lapels were wide and aggressive. I looked at myself in the glass. The woman staring back was not Amara the doormat. She was not Amara the ATM. She was Amara the director of risk management, and she was about to liquidate a bad asset. I applied my lipstick. I did not choose a soft pink. I chose a matte red that matched the suit perfectly. I pulled my hair back into a bun so tight it pulled the skin at my temples, giving me a look of severe focus. No jewelry, no watch, no distractions. I slipped my feet into 4-inch black stilettos. They were not comfortable. They were not sensible. They were weapons designed to puncture the ground with every step. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room. The morning light was flooding the apartment, making the dust motes dance in the air. On the mahogany dining table, the 3 black presentation folders sat waiting. They looked so innocuous, just paper and ink. But I knew the truth. Inside those folders was the end of a marriage, the end of a lifestyle, and the end of my role as the family scapegoat. I ran my hand over the cool leather of the top folder. I felt a surge of power that was almost intoxicating. For 10 years I had walked into rooms wondering if I was good enough, wondering if I belonged. Today I had no such doubts. I was the smartest person in the room. I was the only one who knew the script. I picked up the stack and slid them into my structured leather tote bag. The weight was significant. I walked to the private elevator and pressed the button for the garage. The doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my safe, quiet sanctuary. As the numbers counted down, taking me closer to the street, closer to the confrontation, I did not feel fear. I felt a cold, terrifying calm. The valet brought my car around. He looked at me and hesitated for a second, surprised by the intensity of the red suit. "Good morning, Miss Wilson," he stammered. "You look powerful." I gave him a small, sharp smile. "Thank you. I am going to a closing." I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. The leather was cool under my palms. I checked the GPS. Destination Title I guarantee. Estimated time of arrival 20 minutes. I put the car in drive and pulled out into the traffic. The wolf was coming to dinner and she was wearing red. The conference room on the 12th floor of the Title I guarantee building was a temple to corporate excess. It was a corner suite wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the suburban sprawl that Hunter so desperately wanted to rule. The air inside smelled of leather polish and expensive filtered coffee. In the center of the room sat a mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on. It was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the faces of the people who were currently counting chickens that would never hatch. Hunter sat at the head of the table, legs spread wide in a posture of total, unearned dominance. He was wearing his best navy blazer, the one with the gold buttons that he thought made him look like a commodore. He looked rested. He looked smug. He looked like a man who had successfully bullied the world into giving him exactly what he wanted. He tapped his fingers on the wood, checking his watch with a theatrical sigh, not of impatience but of importance. To his right, Destiny was vibrating with manic energy. She had a stack of paint swatches spread out on the table covering the legal pads. She was holding up a strip of beige cards to the light, debating the merits of eggshell versus cream for the master bedroom. She looked radiant. It was the glow of a woman who believes she has just secured her financial future without lifting a finger. She was already mentally decorating a house she did not own using money she had not earned. Mike, the real estate agent, was hovering around them like an anxious waiter. He was a man with a shiny suit and a smile that looked like it had been surgically attached. He was pouring sparkling water into crystal glasses, laughing a little too hard at Hunter's jokes. Mike was doing the mental math on a $600,000 sale. The 3% commission was practically already spent in his head. He treated Hunter and Destiny like royalty, because to him they were the golden ticket. "Do not worry about the parking validation," Mike said, beaming at Hunter. "We will take care of everything. You guys are going to love this neighborhood. The country club is only 3 minutes away." Hunter nodded, taking a sip of the sparkling water. Exactly why we chose it, Mike. I need to be close to the green for my meetings. And my sister-in-law, Amara, she finally understood that. You know how families are. Sometimes you have to put your foot down to get everyone moving in the right direction. He laughed, a deep, self-satisfied sound. Amara is a good kid, she just needs guidance on how to use her wealth for the greater good. The closing attorney, a gray-haired man named Mr. Henderson, sat quietly at the other end of the table, organizing a stack of documents 3 inches thick. He placed little yellow sticky notes with the words, "Sign here," on dozens of pages. The stack represented a 30-year commitment, a mountain of debt, a shackle. But to Hunter and Destiny, it looked like a trophy. Destiny leaned over to Hunter and whispered loudly, "Did you see the comments on my post? Everyone is so jealous. Becky from high school said she wishes she had a sister like Amara." Hunter smirked. "Yeah, well, Amara knows who really runs the show. She will be here. She knows better than to be late for me." The room was filled with the warm, fuzzy feeling of impending success. They were safe. They were happy. They were completely oblivious. They had no idea that the elevator was currently rising toward the 12th floor, carrying not a guarantor, but an executioner. They were sipping water and dreaming of swimming pools while the tsunami was already crashing against the glass. The double doors to the conference room were heavy solid oak, but they swung open effortlessly under my hand. I stepped across the threshold, and the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. It was physical. The warm chatter about paint colors and country clubs died a sudden, violent death. The air seemed to crystallize, dropping 20 degrees in a single second. I walked into the room, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor with a slow, rhythmic cadence that sounded like a countdown. Click, click, click. I was wearing the crimson power suit. In a room full of navy blues and neutral beiges, I looked like a wound. I looked like a warning sign. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room latch onto me. Mike, the real estate agent, froze with a water pitcher in midair, his smile faltering as he took in the severity of my expression. The closing attorney, Mr. Henderson, looked up over the rim of his reading glasses, his legal instincts suddenly prickling with unease. He saw what the others did not. He saw that I was not a woman coming to sign a check. I was a woman coming to collect a debt. But Hunter and Destiny were blind. They were so blinded by their own greed and entitlement that they could not see the predator standing right in front of them. Destiny looked up from her paint swatches, her eyes scanning my outfit with a mixture of jealousy and disdain. She let out a small scoff. "Wow, Amara," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "That is a very aggressive color for a Tuesday morning. You look like you are going to a funeral or a fashion show. We are just signing papers. Relax." I did not answer her. I did not even look at her. My gaze was locked on Hunter. He was sitting at the head of the table, legs spread wide, claiming the space like a king on his throne. He looked at me and rolled his eyes, checking his watch with an exaggerated sigh of annoyance. "You are late, Amara," he said, his tone dismissive and bored. "We have been waiting 10 minutes. My tea time is at 11, and I need to hit the driving range before the round. Come on, let us speed this up." He picked up a heavy, expensive pen from the table and held it out toward me. It was a gesture of command. He expected me to scurry over, apologize for my tardiness, take the pen and sign away my financial freedom. He expected me to be the good little sister, the reliable wallet, the silent partner. He looked at the pen and then back at me, shaking it slightly. "Just sign where the yellow sticky notes are. Do not bother reading the fine print, it is all standard boilerplate. Just get it done so we can get out of here." I stood at the opposite end of the table. I did not move to take the pen. I did not sit down in the empty chair they had left for me. I placed my leather tote bag on the table with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent room, making the real estate agent jump. I looked at Hunter. I looked at his smug, arrogant face. I looked at the hand holding the pen, the same hand that had signed fraudulent credit card applications in my name. He thought the pen was the key to his new life. He thought that in seconds I would grant him a house and a fresh start. He had no idea that he was holding the detonator to his own destruction. I slowly reached into my bag. The room was silent. They watched my hand, expecting me to pull out reading glasses or a phone. Instead, I pulled out 3 black presentation folders. I slid them across the polished mahogany table. They spun perfectly, coming to rest directly in front of Hunter Destiny and the loan officer. I did not take the pen. I took a breath. And then I let the temperature drop to 0. I did not reach for the gold-plated pen that Hunter was waving in my face. Instead, I folded my arms across my chest and leaned back against the edge of the credenza. The room was silent, waiting for me to take my seat, but I just looked at Hunter with a calm, pleasant smile. Before we sign these papers, Hunter, I have a question about your schedule today. You mentioned you have a tea time at 11. Is Amber meeting you there, or is she meeting you at the clubhouse afterwards? The effect was instantaneous. Hunter went completely still. The arrogant smirk on his face evaporated, leaving behind a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. His eyes darted to Destiny, then back to me, then to the door as if looking for an escape route. The pen in his hand wavered. Destiny frowned, looking between us with genuine confusion. She laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Who is Amber? We do not know anyone named Amber." "Amara, stop playing games and sit down. You are making everyone uncomfortable." I nodded at the black folder sitting in front of her. "I'm not playing games, Destiny." "Open the folder. Page 1. Hunter lunged forward. "Do not open that," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Amara is just trying to sabotage us. She is jealous, Destiny. She is trying to ruin our moment because she is bitter and alone. Do not look at it." But it was too late. Curiosity is a powerful instinct. If you're still here, leave a comment so I know you're with me. And tell me if it were, would you stop her? Or let the truth come out? One quick note: the next part includes dramatized fictional elements. If you'd rather not continue, this is where you can stop. Destiny flipped open the cover. Her eyes scanned the first document. It was the invoice from Titan Pro Golf, the receipt for the $4,000 custom clubs. I watched her eyes move down the page, past the price tag, past the date, until they landed on the customization field. I saw the exact moment the words hit her. Her breath hitched. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She read it again, and again. Hunter and Amber forever. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin pasty and gray beneath her heavy makeup. She looked up at her husband. Her voice was a whisper. "Hunter, what is this?" Hunter scrambled to come up with a lie. He was sweating now, huge beads of perspiration breaking out on his forehead. "It is a joke, Destiny. It is a gag gift for a buddy of mine. His name is Amber. I mean, his nickname is Amber, because he drinks amber ale. It is just guys messing around. Amara is twisting it. She typed that up herself. You know she is good with computers. She forged it to break us up." I shook my head slowly. "It is not a forgery, Hunter, and neither are the hotel receipts on page 2. The Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead, last month. 2 nights, room service for 2, champagne and strawberries. Charged to my emergency credit card. The one you said was for groceries." Destiny turned the page. Her hands were shaking so violently that the paper rattled against the mahogany table. She stared at the hotel folio. The dates matched the weekend Hunter said he was at a business conference in Atlanta. The weekend she had stayed home with a sick child while he was supposedly out providing for the family. Hunter slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. "That is a lie," he roared. "I was at a conference. I lost the receipt, so Amara faked one. She is a liar. She is a psychopath. Look at her standing there in that red suit. She planned this. She wants to destroy me." I looked at the real estate agent and the closing attorney. They were staring at the floor, wishing they could vanish into the carpet. This was no longer a closing. It was a crime scene. I looked back at my sister. She was not looking at me anymore. She was looking at the man she had defended for 10 years, the man she had bullied her own sister to support, and for the first time, she saw a stranger. Hunter stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. I am not listening to this. Come on, Destiny. We are leaving. We will find another lender. We do not need her money. I took a step forward. My voice was low and lethal. Sit down, Hunter. We are not done. The adultery is just the appetizer. Turn to page 3. Destiny. Let us see how much he really loves you. Hunter was still sputtering, trying to deny the affair, but I was not done. I did not give him a second to breathe. I turned my attention back to Destiny, who was staring at the hotel receipt like it was a death certificate. Her hands were trembling. She was processing the betrayal of the cheating, but she had not yet realized the depth of the cruelty. I needed her to see the full picture. I needed her to understand what kind of man she was actually married to. Turn to page 4. Destiny. I said, my voice soft but commanding. This is the part that should make you sick to your stomach. Remember yesterday morning. Remember how angry you were. You screamed at me on the phone. You told me that Trey had stolen $8,600 from my account. You told me he spent it on video games and in-app purchases. You grounded him. You took away his iPad. You made him cry. Destiny looked up at me, her eyes red and confused. Yeah, he did. Hunter showed me the notification. He said Trey must have clicked the wrong buttons. I shook my head slowly. Look at the itemized list on page 4. I pulled the transaction logs directly from the bank's mainframe. I want you to find the video game's Destiny. Look for Roblox. Look for Minecraft. Look for the App Store. She scanned the page. Her eyes darted back and forth up and down the columns of numbers. I watched the realization dawn on her face. It was a slow, painful breaking of her reality. I do not see them, she whispered. I do not see any games. That is because there are no games, I said, my voice hardening. Trey did not spend a single dime. That $8,000 did not go to a child's entertainment. It went to a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany & Company. It went to a private dinner at Le Bernardin. It went to a weekend spa package. Trey did not steal my money, Hunter did. And when I caught him, he panicked. He needed a scapegoat. So he looked around and chose the easiest target he could find. His own 11-year-old son. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. I looked over at my mother Wanda sitting in the corner. For the first time in my life, she was not looking at me with judgment. She was looking at Hunter with pure, unadulterated horror. Her hand was covering her mouth, and her eyes were wide. She had spent years defending this man, calling him a good father, calling him the provider. Now she was watching the truth strip him naked. You threw him under the bus. Hunter, I said, turning on him. You stood in that kitchen and watched your wife scream at a terrified little boy. You watched Trey cry. You watched him beg for forgiveness for a crime he did not commit. And you said nothing. You let your son carry the weight of your sin just so you could keep your secret for a few more days. You are not just a thief. You are a coward. Hunter tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to fail him. He slumped back into the chair. It was a mistake, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. I was going to pay it back. I did not want to worry Destiny. I was protecting her. Protecting me! Destiny screamed. The sound tore through the polite atmosphere of the law office. She stood up, knocking her chair backward. You grounded him, Hunter. You told him he was a bad kid. You made him write an apology letter to Amara. And all the while you were buying diamonds for some girl named Amber. Destiny looked at me. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but this time they were tears of guilt. I punished him, Amara. I took his favorite toys away. I told him I was ashamed of him. She put her head in her hands and sobbed. The sound was raw and guttural. It was the sound of a mother realizing she had failed her child to protect a monster. I watched them crumble. The facade was gone. But I had one more folder left. And this one was the nail in the coffin. The sobbing in the room was the only sound for a moment, but I could not let the momentum die. I had one final blow to deliver, one final layer of their reality to peel back. Hunter was sitting with his head in his hands, defeated by the revelation of his affair. But he was still hoping that the financial damage was limited. He was still hoping that I would scream and yell but ultimately pay the bill to save the family name. He was wrong. I reached out and tapped the third black folder, the one lying unopened in front of the loan officer. "Open it," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a sentence. The loan officer looked at me nervously, then flipped the cover. He stared at the documents for a moment, his brow furrowing in confusion. Then his eyes went wide. He looked up at Hunter with an expression of professional disgust. Destiny wiped her eyes and looked at the page. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It is a credit report, Destiny, but it is not mine. And it is not really Hunter's either. It is a hybrid, a monster created by fraud." I walked around the table slowly, standing directly behind Hunter's chair. "You see, Destiny, your husband did not just use my emergency card. That was amateur hour. For the last 2 years, he has been opening new lines of credit using my social security number. He forged my signature. He created a fake billing address at a post office box in Kennesaw so I would never see the statements." I leaned down close to Hunter's ear. "Tell her, Hunter. Tell her how much you really stole." Hunter did not speak. He could not breathe. I stood up straight and addressed the room. "The total is not $8,600. The total debt across 3 fraudulent accounts is $68,422. Destiny gasped. The sound was like all the air leaving the room at once. "68,000, she repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes. $68,000 spent on a lifestyle you could not afford, on gifts for women who are not your wife, and on keeping up a facade of success. And he did it all in my name. He destroyed my credit to build his ego." I looked at the real estate agent whose smile had completely vanished. I looked at the attorney who was now slowly closing his file. And finally, I looked at Hunter. "So, to answer the question of why I am here today, I did not come to sign your loan papers. I will not be the guarantor for this house. I will not be the safety net for a criminal. I came here to deliver a notification." I pulled a single sheet of paper from my pocket. It was the confirmation from the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. At 4:30 this morning, I filed a formal report with the federal authorities and the local police department for identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery. I have submitted all the evidence in those folders to the detective assigned to the case. Hunter looked up at me. His face was pale, his eyes wild with terror. "You called the police. Amara, you cannot do that. I am family. You are sending me to jail." I looked at him with zero sympathy. "No, Hunter. You sent yourself to jail the moment you signed my name. I am just the witness." I turned to the attorney. "Mr. Henderson, I apologize for wasting your time. There will be no closing today, and I suggest you hold on to those documents. The prosecution might need them as evidence." I picked up my bag. The weight was gone. I felt lighter than air. I turned my back on the table, on the crying sister and the ruined man, and I walked toward the door. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder with every second. Justice had arrived. The reaction from the bank was swift and brutal. The loan officer did not even look at Hunter. He reached across the mahogany table and physically pulled the stack of closing documents away from him. It was a sharp defensive motion, like pulling a child away from a fire. He opened his briefcase and swept the papers inside, snapping the locks shut with a finality that echoed in the room. "Mr. Wilson," he said, his voice cold and professional. "In light of this new information regarding federal fraud charges and identity theft, this transaction is terminated immediately. The bank cannot lend to a borrower under active criminal investigation. Your pre-approval is void. The application is denied. Please do not contact us again." The real estate agent Mike looked like he was going to be sick. He watched his commission evaporate in real time. He grabbed the paint swatches from Destiny's hands. "I am sorry, folks, but the sellers have a backup offer. I have to call them right now. The house is gone." Destiny sat frozen. Her hands were still shaped, as if she were holding the swatches that were no longer there. The house. Gone. The loan. Gone. The dream. Dead. Then the double doors burst open. The sound of heavy boots on the hardwood floor shattered the last remnants of the country club atmosphere. Two uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit walked in. They did not look like they were there for a social call. They looked bored and dangerous. The detective scanned the room and his eyes landed on Hunter. "Hunter Wilson," he asked. Hunter stood up, knocking his chair over. It crashed loudly against the floor. Wait, I can explain. It is a misunderstanding. My sister-in-law, she is just mad at me. We can work this out." Amara, tell them. Tell them it is a mistake." The detective ignored him. He walked around the table, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "Hunter Wilson, you are under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Click, click, click. It was the sound of Hunter's life ending. He began to cry. Not a stoic, silent cry, but a loud, blubbering wail. He begged. He pleaded. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Amara, please. I am scared. Help me." I just watched. I watched as they hauled him toward the door, his expensive navy blazer bunched up around his shoulders, his dignity left somewhere on the floor. That was when Destiny finally broke. She did not run to him. She did not try to stop the police. She just screamed. It was a primal, piercing scream of a woman who realizes she is standing in a crater. She looked around the room. She looked at the empty spot where the closing papers used to be. She looked at the handcuffs on her husband. She looked at me. "My house," she sobbed. "You took my house. You took my money. What am I going to do? I have nothing. Amara, I have nothing." She slumped forward onto the table, burying her face in her arms, knocking over a glass of water. The water spilled across the polished wood, soaking into the expensive rug, but no one moved to clean it up. She was crying for the house, not the husband. She was crying because the free ride was over. I picked up my leather tote bag. The room smelled of fear and cheap cologne. I looked at my mother, who was sitting in the corner weeping into a tissue, unable to look at her son in cuffs. I looked at Destiny one last time. "You do not have nothing, Destiny," I said calmly. "You have your truth. And you have a lot of work to do." I turned and walked out the door, past the stunned receptionist and into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of my sister's wailing. The silence returned. I checked my watch. It was 10:15. The meeting was over, and so was their hold on me. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they ground Hunter Wilson down to dust. The federal court system did not care about his golf handicap or his charm. They only cared about the evidence, and the evidence was overwhelming. I did not attend the sentencing, but my lawyer sent me the transcript. Hunter stood before the judge, stripping of his expensive suits, wearing an orange jumpsuit that did nothing to hide his fear. He tried to cry. He tried to blame the pressure of providing for his family, but the judge was not swayed. He saw Hunter for exactly what he was, a predator who preyed on the women who loved him. The sentence was harsh, but fair. 8 years in a federal correctional facility for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. He would be eligible for parole in 5, but by then his golf swing would be a distant memory, and his son would be a man who knew better than to be like his father. For Destiny, the fall was faster and harder. With Hunter in prison and her access to my money permanently severed, reality crashed down on her like a collapsing building. The bank accounts were frozen. The rental lease was terminated. The leased vehicles were repossessed in the middle of the night, leaving tire marks on the driveway and shame in the neighborhood. She had no choice. She packed what little she had left into cardboard boxes and moved back into our mother Wanda's small two-bedroom house in the older part of town. It was a humbling return. There were no granite countertops there, no walk-in closets. Destiny and Trey had to share the small guest room, sleeping on a pull-out sofa that squeaked every time they moved. The internet was slow, the neighborhood was loud, and for the first time in her life, Destiny could not post her way out of it. She deleted her Instagram account the day she started her new job. She was no longer a lifestyle influencer. She was a waitress at a local diner, working double shifts on her feet to pay for Trey's school clothes. But a strange thing happened amidst the poverty and the struggle. The toxicity began to drain away. Without Hunter whispering entitlement into her ear, Destiny began to change. She came home tired, smelling of grease and coffee, but she was honest. She learned the value of $1 because she actually had to earn it. She stopped blaming the world for her problems and started looking in the mirror. The biggest change, however, was in Trey. I drove by the house one afternoon just to check on them from a distance. I saw him in the front yard. He was not huddled over an iPad, terrified of making a mistake. He was kicking a soccer ball against the fence. He looked poorer, yes. His sneakers were worn and his shirt was faded, but he looked free. The shadow of his father was gone. He was no longer a scapegoat for a grown man's failures. He was just a boy living a simple, difficult, but honest life. I did not stop the car. I did not go in to save them. They did not need saving. They needed this. They needed the struggle to wash away the entitlement. They were learning the lesson that I had learned years ago. That dignity is not found in a brand name or a country club membership. It is found in the ability to look yourself in the eye and know that you owe nothing to anyone. Hunter was in a cage of iron bars, but Destiny and Trey were finally breaking out of the cage of lies. It was a hard road ahead for them, but for the first time, it was a road that led somewhere real. And as I drove away back to my quiet, peaceful life, I knew that was the greatest gift I could have ever given them. The truth. It was a Tuesday evening when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My phone chimed softly on the marble kitchen island. It was not a demand for money. It was not a frantic text from a relative. It was a notification from the fraud department of Chase Bank. I picked it up and read the message. The investigation regarding the disputed charges has been concluded in your favor. The provisional credit of $68,000 has been made permanent. I stared at the screen. The red negative numbers that had haunted my accounts for months were gone. The debt that Hunter had racked up in my name was erased as if it had never existed. The legal system had done its work. The credit bureaus had scrubbed my report clean. On paper, I was whole again. My score was back to a perfect 820. The financial wound had healed completely, leaving not even a scar. I put the phone down and picked up a glass of vintage Cabernet. I walked out onto the terrace of my penthouse, sliding the glass door open to let in the cool evening breeze coming off Lake Michigan. The city of Chicago lay spread out before me, a grid of glittering gold and amber lights. It was beautiful. It was vast, and for the first time in 10 years, it felt like it belonged to me. I took a sip of the wine, letting the complex flavors settle on my tongue. I thought about the empty chair at the family table. I thought about the silence of my phone. I had not spoken to my mother or my sister in 6 months. The last update I heard was through a third cousin. They were struggling. They were working hard. They were learning to survive without the crutch of my bank account. A part of me, the part that was trained to be a dutiful daughter, felt a twinge of sadness. I was effectively an orphan now. I had amputated my own family tree to save my life. I was alone in this big, expensive apartment. But as I leaned against the railing and looked down at the streets below, I realized that this was not the loneliness of abandonment. This was the solitude of freedom. I was no longer waking up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering what crisis I would have to pay for today. I was no longer shrinking myself to make insecure people feel big. I was no longer apologizing for my success. The toxic cord had been cut, and the fresh air was finally filling my lungs. I looked at my reflection in the glass door. The woman staring back was not the tired, frustrated doormat I had been. She was calm. She was powerful. She was protected. I had used my resources not to buy love, but to buy a fortress. I had used my intelligence not to enable fraud, but to secure my future. I realized then that the red suit was not just a costume for a day. It was who I was. I was the firewall. I raised my glass to the city lights, to the empty apartment, and to the quiet, peaceful life I had fought so hard to reclaim. And to you listening to this story, remember this? I didn't lose my family. I lost my illusions. I stayed too long, paid too much, and called it love. If I could speak to my younger self, I would say this: don't confuse loyalty with silence, and don't mistake endurance for virtue. I prayed for peace, but God showed me that peace sometimes requires distance, not sacrifice. When I ignored the warning signs, I taught people how to treat me. This was never just about money. It was about boundaries. What began as love turned into control, and control became family betrayal. I told myself I was being kind, but God kept whispering that kindness without truth becomes self-destruction. If you see yourself in this story, please hear me. Don't become the hero of someone else's mess. Learn from my mistakes so you don't repeat them. People love stories of family revenge, but real family revenge isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. And yes, sometimes family betrayal forces you to choose yourself. When I finally let go, God didn't shame me. He protected me. He reminded me that love doesn't steal, manipulate, or demand your dignity as payment. So if you're walking through family betrayal right now, pause. Ask yourself what staying is truly costing you. Choose honesty. Choose boundaries. Choose healing over applause. That choice may look like family revenge to others, but it's actually survival. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, pass it along to someone who needs it, and consider subscribing for more stories like this. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. And a quick note: upcoming stories may include fictionalized details created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to exit and choose content that fits you better.